The morning sun streamed between the high-rise buildings of Boston, bathing Rachel Anderson's architectural firm in golden light. She had established herself as a respected architect in this city. The commercial buildings and residential projects she had worked on were frequently featured in local architecture magazines, and she was highly regarded by her peers. "Good morning, beautiful architect," her husband Michael said as he wrapped his arms around her from behind and handed her a coffee cup. He worked as an executive at a major consulting firm and had met Rachel during their college years. They had been married for 8 years and had no children, but both were passionate about their work and lived fulfilling lives. "I'll be late tonight. I have the final presentation for a new project," Rachel replied while reviewing blueprints. "I'm going to be busy preparing for a business trip too. I'm scheduled to go to Chicago for 3 days next week." Michael was adjusting his tie in front of the mirror, fixing his appearance. His well-defined features and refined demeanor had a charm that captivated people upon first meeting. As Rachel watched her husband, she felt satisfied with their life together once again. However, when she thought about her family back home in Dallas, Texas, she sometimes felt a small weight in her chest. Ever since her father Robert had suddenly passed away from a heart attack 4 years ago, her relationship with her mother Barbara and sister Christina had subtly changed. Barbara had become more withdrawn than before, and their phone conversations had grown shorter. Christina worked at a local bank, but she seemed to lack passion for her job and always appeared dissatisfied with something. "Maybe I should go home this weekend," Rachel said on impulse. "That's a good idea. It's been a while since I've seen your family," Michael smiled, but she thought she saw a shadow cross his expression for a moment. That weekend, Rachel traveled to Dallas alone. Michael couldn't accompany her due to sudden work obligations. The route from the airport to her family home was familiar, but since her father's death, she had begun to feel a certain loneliness along the way. The family home was a 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Roses that her mother carefully tended bloomed in the garden, but they didn't seem as well maintained as before. "Rachel." Barbara appeared at the front door, but her smile seemed forced somehow. "You should have called if you were coming home suddenly." "It's a surprise, Mom. I'm glad to see you're doing well." Rachel hugged her mother, but Barbara's body felt smaller than before. When they went inside, the living room was neat and organized, but it gave the impression that the sense of daily life had somehow faded. "Where's Christina?" "She's in her room. She hasn't been feeling well lately." Barbara's voice contained a faint tension. Rachel went upstairs and knocked on her sister's door. "Christina?" "It's me, Rachel." After waiting a while, the door opened just slightly. Christina's face was pale with dark circles under her eyes. "Why are you here?" "I came home for a visit." "Are you okay? You look unwell." "I'm just a little tired. I have plans to go out tomorrow, so I want to rest early tonight." Christina gave a vague answer and closed the door. Rachel was puzzled but didn't pursue it further to avoid upsetting her sister. The next morning, as Rachel was making coffee in the kitchen, Barbara was frantically searching for her car keys. "Where are you going?" "I have some errands to run." "Would you like to come with me?" "No, I'll just relax here." Barbara left the house with a look of relief. Once alone, Rachel took the opportunity to look around the family home in detail for the first time in a while. Her father's study remained unchanged, with his beloved novels and history books lined up on the bookshelves. Around noon, when her mother returned home, Rachel noticed a small piece of paper flutter from the car. It was a pamphlet that read, "Bridal Fair in Progress." Though surprised, Rachel thought Christina might have gotten a boyfriend and approached Barbara with a smile. "Mom, this fell from your car." The moment Barbara saw the pamphlet, her face changed color and she frantically snatched it away. "That's just an advertisement." It was in the mailbox. "Is Christina getting married?" "I thought she'd been acting strange lately." "Maybe she's worried about her boyfriend?" At Rachel's question, Barbara was clearly agitated. Her hands were shaking as she clutched the pamphlet tightly. "That's none of your business." Rachel was surprised by her mother's vehement rejection. Barbara was usually a calm and rational woman. She rarely became this emotional in front of her daughters. "Mom, what's wrong? Are you hiding something?" "I'm not hiding anything. Leave Christina alone. It's none of your concern." Barbara ran upstairs and shut herself in her room. Rachel was left alone in the living room. Her mother's abnormal reaction intensified the anxiety deep in her chest. The next morning, Rachel returned to Boston, but the events at home wouldn't leave her mind. Even when she tried to concentrate on work at the design firm, her mother's agitated expression kept floating through her thoughts. During lunch break, she decided to call her childhood friend Jennifer. Jennifer worked at a local real estate company and was knowledgeable about Dallas area information. She had been a close friend since high school, and they had kept in regular contact even after Rachel left her hometown. "Jenny, I want to ask you something about Christina." On the other end of the phone, Jennifer paused briefly. "Did Christina do something? She's been acting strange lately. Mom seems to be hiding something too. Could there be talk of marriage?" Another silence followed. Jennifer's voice was more cautious than usual. "Rachel, I don't know all the details, but this might be something you should know about." "What is it? Tell me. Let's meet in person to talk." "It's hard to say over the phone. Can you come to Dallas next Friday?" Jennifer's vague answer further fueled Rachel's anxiety. Even her best friend was hiding something. What on earth was happening with her family? Rachel arranged her work schedule and headed to Dallas the following Friday. This time she didn't explain the detailed circumstances to Michael. Her husband had been traveling frequently on business lately, and their conversations at home had become infrequent. At a cafe in downtown Dallas, Rachel reunited with Jennifer after a long time. She looked more mature than before, but her expression was heavy. "Rachel, what I'm about to tell you might be painful for you." Jennifer was carefully choosing her words while holding her coffee cup with both hands. "Christina is indeed planning to get married. But I think you should know about the man she's marrying." "Is it someone I know?" "Yes, someone you know very well," Jennifer sighed deeply. "But I can't tell you myself. You need to find out for yourself." Rachel was frustrated by her friend's evasive answer. However, from Jennifer's expression, she could understand that this was a serious matter. "When is the wedding? Where will it be held?" 3 weeks from this Sunday." "But Rachel, I don't think you should go." "Why not? I'm family, aren't I? It's natural for me to attend my sister's wedding." Jennifer looked troubled as she clasped her hands on the table. "Aunt Barbara asked me to keep it secret from you. But as a friend, I think it's better for you to prepare yourself mentally now rather than find out later." That night, Rachel sat alone in her hotel room, deep in thought. The fact that she was being excluded from her family weighed heavily on her chest. Why was she the only one not told about the wedding? Was there such a deep rift between Christina and herself? The next day, Rachel visited an acquaintance who worked at a local wedding venue. Sarah was a classmate from high school who now worked as an event coordinator at a luxury wedding venue in the Dallas suburbs. "Rachel. It's been so long. You look great." Sarah welcomed her warmly, but when Rachel asked about Christina's wedding, her expression clouded. "Oh, that event. It's actually not at our venue. But the industry is small, so I know where it's being held." Sarah looked around and then lowered her voice. "Lodgewood Manor. It's a historic mansion in the suburbs. A very high-end venue that usually requires reservations 6 months in advance. But this wedding was arranged suddenly." "Lodgewood Manor? Such an expensive venue?" Rachel was surprised. With Christina's salary, she shouldn't have been able to afford such a venue. "I heard the guest list is small. Just family for an intimate ceremony." "But Rachel, aren't you invited?" At Sarah's question, Rachel forced a bitter smile. "It's complicated." On the flight home, Rachel called Michael. 3 weeks from Sunday, I'm thinking of going home. Christina's having her wedding." On the other end of the phone, Michael paused briefly. "A wedding? That's wonderful news. But I might have an urgent business trip that weekend. An emergency project came up with a client in Seattle. Really? That's too bad. But I'll be fine going alone. I'm worried about you going alone. Family relationships are complicated. There was an unusual tension in Michael's voice. Rachel found her husband's reaction strange, but if it was for work, she had to accept it. For the 2 weeks after returning to Boston, Rachel tried to focus on work, but her family situation wouldn't leave her mind. When she woke up in the middle of the night, she kept thinking about why she was the only one being excluded. Michael had also become even busier than before, often coming home late at night. Their conversations as a couple became minimal, and Rachel's sense of loneliness deepened. The day before the wedding, Rachel finally made up her mind. Even if she wasn't invited, she wanted to witness this important moment in her sister's life. And she wanted to see with her own eyes what secret her family was hiding. The next morning, Rachel lied to her husband and headed to Dallas. She told him she was attending a friend's wedding. Michael looked relieved and said, "Have a good time." The Sunday in November in Texas was wrapped in gentle autumn sunshine. On her way to Lodgewood Manor in the Dallas suburbs, Rachel kept taking deep breaths in her rental car. Her heart was pounding violently in her chest. Lodgewood Manor was a historic mansion built in the 19th century, surrounded by vast gardens. Rachel parked her car some distance from the parking lot and disguised herself with a wide-brimmed hat and light scarf. She put on sunglasses and took care to be as inconspicuous as possible. As she quietly walked around the mansion, she could hear voices coming from the back garden. Hiding behind the hedges, Rachel carefully approached. In the beautifully maintained garden, a white tent had been set up with a small number of chairs arranged. There were about 20 guests, confirming this was indeed an intimate ceremony with just family and close friends. She could see Barbara wearing a light purple dress, standing with a tense expression. Next to her were Uncle Tom and Aunt Linda. Cousin Jimmy and his wife were also in attendance. However, Rachel was nowhere to be seen. It was as if she alone didn't exist, completely excluded from this family gathering. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the beautiful sound of a string quartet began to resonate through the garden. Rachel watched the ceremony through gaps in the hedge. First, the minister took his place at the altar. Then the groom appeared in a black tuxedo. In that moment, Rachel's world came crashing down with a sound. When she saw the groom's face, she felt the blood drain from her body. It was Michael, the man she had spent 8 years of her life with. He was standing at the altar waiting for the bride with a nervous but happy smile. Rachel clung to the hedge, desperately fighting the urge to collapse. Various fragments of memory swirled in her head. The recent frequent business trips, the decreased conversations at home, and last night's lie about an emergency project in Seattle. Everything converged into one horrifying truth. When the wedding march began, Christina started walking down the aisle alone, holding a photo of their father to her chest. She was dressed in a pure white wedding gown and looked more beautiful and radiant than Rachel had ever seen her. But that beauty seemed cruel to Rachel. When Christina stood next to Michael, the two gazed at each other lovingly. The scene was exactly like a young couple filled with love. Tears began to overflow from Rachel's eyes. The minister was conducting the ceremony in a resonant voice. "Beloved friends, thank you for attending the wedding of Michael Thompson and Christina Anderson today. Marriage is a sacred covenant where two souls become one." The minister continued, "Michael, do you promise to love Christina, in sickness and in health, and walk through life together?" "I do." Michael's voice was gentler and more confident than Rachel had ever heard it. "Christina, do you promise to love Michael and continue to support him through any difficulties?" "I do." Christina's voice was overcome with emotion as she answered while wiping away tears. The two exchanged rings and shared a deep kiss. Warm applause rose from the attendees. Barbara was applauding while crying, but her expression seemed to contain complex emotions. Rachel took out her smartphone with trembling hands and began recording the scene. She needed evidence. She had to document this unbelievable reality. The minister was about to speak his final words. If anyone has any objection to this marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. This was a formal question that usually no one answered. However, something snapped inside Rachel. 8 years of marriage, love for her family, and above all, her own dignity burst forth as a voice from her throat. I object. Rachel's shout echoed through the garden. All the attendees turned to look at her. As she removed her hat and scarf, Rachel emerged from behind the hedge. The ceremony was enveloped in silence. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Barbara turned pale and covered her mouth with her hand. Christina began to tremble and almost dropped her bouquet. And Michael stood frozen with the color drained from his face. That man is my husband. Rachel shouted again with a trembling voice. Murmurs spread among the attendees. Uncle Tom stood up, trying to understand what was happening. Rachel. Michael finally spoke. I didn't expect you to be here. Of course not. Did you forget that I'm your wife? We haven't gotten divorced yet. Christina suddenly broke down crying. I'm sorry. We were going to tell you. But the timing. Timing? Rachel said as she walked toward her sister. You deceived me for 8 months, and you're saying it's a matter of timing? Barbara spoke with a trembling voice. Rachel, please don't make a scene here. Everyone is watching. Everyone? Everyone except me. Am I not family? Is there a reason I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding? The minister was confused, unsure whether to interrupt the ceremony. The attendees stood up and began whispering among themselves. The beautiful wedding had instantly turned into a scene of chaos. Michael slowly approached Rachel. Let me explain. This isn't as simple as you think. Not simple? My husband is having a wedding ceremony with my sister. What could be simpler than that? Rachel's voice trembled with anger and sadness. The life she had believed in for 8 years was shattering to pieces before her eyes. Her beloved husband, dear sister, and even her mother had all betrayed her. Sister, we really love each other, Christina pleaded through tears. Michael told me that your marriage was just a formality. That you only cared about work and nothing else. Those words delivered the final blow to Rachel's heart. It was true that she had been absorbed in work lately. But was that a reason for their marital love to cool? And was that justification for an affair with her sister? Rachel removed her wedding ring and threw it at Michael's feet. Are you satisfied now? Can you be happy after destroying my life? However, at that moment, Christina suddenly grimaced and stumbled while holding her stomach. Red blood began to seep through the white fabric of her wedding dress. Seeing the red stain spreading across the pure white wedding gown, the attendees panicked. Rachel's anger instantly turned to concern for her sister. Christina. Rachel rushed to her sister and supported her swaying body. Christina's face was pale with cold sweat beading on her forehead. My stomach hurts, Christina whispered in a trembling voice. Call an ambulance. Rachel shouted to the attendees. Michael was agitated and stood frozen, not knowing what to do. Barbara frantically took out her cell phone. Hello, we need an ambulance please. At Lodgewood Manor. A pregnant woman is bleeding. Pregnant. That word delivered a new shock to Rachel's heart. Her sister was pregnant. That might have been the reason for this sudden wedding. How far along? Rachel asked while holding her sister's hand. 4 months. Christina answered through tears. The baby. I'm worried about the baby. Rachel was overwhelmed by complex emotions. Anger, sadness, and sympathy for her sister's pain swirled in her heart. No matter how betrayed she felt, Christina was still family. And there was a new life in her womb. The sound of an approaching ambulance siren could be heard. The paramedics arrived and placed Christina on a stretcher. Rachel naturally continued to hold her sister's hand. Please come with us to the hospital, a paramedic said to Rachel. Your family, right? Rachel hesitated. Technically, she was still a sister-in-law. but emotionally, she was also a victim of betrayal. "I'll go," Rachel answered. "I'm her sister." Michael also tried to get into the ambulance, but Rachel glared at him. "You take your own car." During the ride to the hospital, Christina was semi-conscious. As Rachel held her sister's hand, various thoughts ran through her mind. 8 months ago, how had Michael and Christina met? No, more accurately, how had they reconnected? Christina had known Michael from before. When they arrived at the hospital, Christina was taken to the emergency room. Rachel and Barbara spent anxious time in the waiting room. Michael also appeared at the hospital but sat awkwardly at a distance. "Rachel," Barbara finally spoke. "There are things I need to explain." Rachel looked at her mother. Barbara's eyes were moist with tears. 8 months ago, Christina fell into a serious depression. She had trouble at work and was in despair about life. That's when Michael happened to come to Dallas on business and reconnected with Christina. Rachel listened to her mother's story silently. At first, Michael was just someone Christina could talk to about her problems. But as time passed, special feelings developed between them. "So they continued their affair without telling me anything," Rachel's voice was cold. Barbara looked away. "Michael told me about his relationship with you. That things weren't going well between you two lately. That you were absorbed in work and neglecting home life. Does that justify the affair?" "It's not a justification. But Michael really loves Christina. And Christina needed him." At that moment, Michael stood up and came to Rachel. His eyes were filled with tears. "Rachel, let me talk." "What is there to talk about now? About 8 months of lies? Or about the truth that you don't love me?" Michael sighed deeply. "You're a wonderful woman. But our marriage had somehow become just a formality. You were passionate about your work, and I didn't want to get in your way. So you ran to my sister?" "I didn't run away. When I'm with Christina, I can be my true self. She needs me, and I want to protect her." Rachel gave a bitter laugh. "Protect? Is the current situation the result of your protection?" At that moment, a doctor appeared in the waiting room. The three of them quickly stood up. "Are you the patient's family?" The doctor looked tired. "The mother is stable. However, unfortunately, the baby." The moment the doctor's words trailed off, Rachel understood everything. Barbara collapsed, and Michael leaned against the wall. "It's a miscarriage. This can happen from early to mid-pregnancy. Strong stress can sometimes be a contributing factor." As she listened to the doctor's explanation, Rachel was overcome with guilt. Her appearance at the wedding and the commotion she caused might have stressed Christina. "Can we see her?" Barbara asked in a trembling voice. "Please wait a moment. Let's wait until she's calmed down." An hour later, Rachel and the others visited Christina's hospital room. Her sister lay in bed with a pale face, staring at the ceiling. "Christina," Barbara gently called out. Her sister turned toward her mother, but her eyes were vacant. "The baby is gone, isn't it?" "Yes. But you're okay. That's what matters most." Christina's gaze turned to Rachel. "I'm sorry. I tried to take something precious from you." Rachel sat by her sister's bedside. "Don't think about that now. Resting is what's important." "But what we did is unforgivable," Christina began to cry. "You were always perfect, and I thought I wasn't even on your radar. So when Michael needed me, I was happy." Rachel took her sister's hand. "Christina, I'm not perfect. I was just bad at expressing my feelings." Michael stood at the entrance to the room. He tried to enter, but Christina shook her head. "Michael, let's end this," Christina said in a weak voice. "We made a mistake." "What are you saying?" "We love each other." "Love?" Christina gave a bitter smile. "Is this the result of love? Betraying my sister, hurting our family, losing the baby. If this is love, I don't want love anymore." Michael was speechless. The new life he had tried to build was crumbling before his eyes. That night, Rachel sat alone on a hospital bench. The most painful day of her life was coming to an end. The end of her marriage, family betrayal, and her sister's tragedy. Everything had come at once. However, strangely, Rachel also felt a sense of clarity. With the truth revealed, the discomfort she had been feeling for so long was finally resolved. It was better to know the painful truth than to continue living a false marriage. 6 months had passed since that tragic Sunday. Rachel was looking out at the Golden Gate Bridge from her new office on a hilltop in San Francisco. The West Coast's warm climate and completely different open atmosphere from Boston were gradually healing her heart. The divorce proceedings went surprisingly smoothly. Michael agreed to pay alimony, and their shared assets were divided fairly. He had written in a letter that he deeply regretted his actions, but Rachel was no longer moved by those words. Her new architectural firm, named Anderson Design Studio, specialized in environmentally friendly sustainable architecture. Rachel's innovative ideas and solid technical skills were highly valued by West Coast entrepreneurs, and within just 6 months of opening, she was handling numerous projects. In the evening, Rachel was rereading a letter from her mother. Barbara's correspondence arrived once a month, updating her on Dallas happenings. Christina continues with psychological therapy. The first few months were really difficult for her, but recently she started to show smiles little by little. She also found a new job and is doing support work for children at a local NPO. That experience may have changed her. Rachel sincerely hoped for her sister's recovery. Her relationship with Christina wasn't completely repaired yet. However, the hatred was already gone. Time had softened the pain. Information about Michael wasn't included in Barbara's letters. However, through contact with friends remaining in Dallas, she could learn about his current situation. Michael was struggling both professionally and personally. After his relationship with Christina ended, another affair was discovered, and he lost trust at work as well. Currently, no one wanted anything to do with him, and he was living lonely days. Rachel felt no sympathy for him. He was simply reaping what he had sown. People who betray others ultimately lose everyone's trust. That was the natural order of things. Rachel, today's presentation was wonderful. The voice belonged to David Chan. He was an environmental engineering specialist and Rachel's business partner who co-ran the firm with her. Recently, their relationship was becoming something beyond work. Thank you, David. That project was only possible because of your technical support. David smiled gently. How about going wine tasting in Napa Valley this weekend? Let's get away from work and talk leisurely. Rachel hesitated briefly but nodded. She certainly had fears about building a new relationship. However, she couldn't remain trapped in the past forever. Life had to keep moving forward. That night, Rachel wrote a letter to Christina for the first time in a long while. Until now, she had avoided direct contact, but she was finally mentally prepared. Dear Christina, I heard from Mom that you started a new job. Support work for children must be wonderful work that utilizes your kindness. I'm also walking a new path on the West Coast. We've been through difficult times, but my days are fulfilling now. I've come to think that family isn't just about blood relations, but relationships where we respect and support each other. I hope that someday we can talk again as sisters. As she put the letter in an envelope, Rachel reflected on the past year. Betrayal, anger, sadness, and forgiveness. After experiencing all these emotions, she had found true strength. Outside the window, San Francisco's night view sparkled. Tomorrow would bring another new day. Rachel took a deep breath and prepared to begin walking a new chapter with hope for the future in her heart. She had learned that true happiness isn't something that depends on others, but something you create for yourself.